a review of the grant parameters in themselves. One of the first things that we would do is assess the issue. The Department of Mental Health Addiction Services requires adherence to what's called the Strategic Prevention Framework. And the first part of any action with a strategic prevention framework is to assess the problem. Because unless you know what the issue is, you can't go on to the second, third, and fourth steps, which would be to build capacity, plan actions and implement actions. So the first thing we're going to be doing is holding just discussion groups, roundtable discussions with invested stakeholders. That would be our schools, our health department, the EMT, all invested stakeholders to get a pulse on what they believe the overarching concerns are with their group as far as vaping, but then also to extend that as far as mental health services and other substance misuse. So then from there, we would go and implement actions. We are recommending that we produce another parent guide. This is updated and produced every couple of years, generally after we do a survey. The last one we did was in 2020. I have copies here if you would like one. But these will be updated and sent to every single household who has a student within the Brookfield public school system. It used to be in times past we would just hand them out at events we table. Last time we did this, because of COVID, we really weren't meeting in person, so we sent them out via mail to every household, and it worked very well. So we plan to do that again. We'll additionally continue our poster campaign within the bathroom stalls of the middle school and high school. Really what we do, all of the student bathroom stalls, we've installed acrylic poster holders. And we put posters in there, a couple different reasons. Number one, if a student's having a very bad day, sometimes the bathroom is the place that they go to just pull it all together. In addition to that, bathroom is also where an individual student would go to vape. And you have a captive audience. So within there we have messaging about the harms of vaping to our middle schools and to our high schoolers about helplines to get help if they would like to stop vaping. And in both of them we have mental health messages. Really just saying it's okay to not be okay. It's also okay to ask for help, and then to have helplines that they can call or text or go online to provide or to get help. So we will continue that. We also will continue our messaging at the ShopRite grocery store. If anyone's been to ShopRite, you go into the checkout, there are generally these digital screens that are in front of all the checkout counters. And we have, in the past, and propose to do it again, put messaging on those screens. Usually we have one about vaping, the risk behaviors and the harms of vaping, and then we also generally have a mental health message that goes in there as well. So that is the primary grant parameters of the grant that's in front of you.
Can I ask a question?
Any questions?
Can you expand a little bit more on how vaping has changed in the schools over the last few years?
Sure.
I know we've had this discussion, but I think the public would like to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Vaping really caught the public eye several years ago. And to the seriousness and the rapid increase in vaping behaviors amongst our students, to the point that federally and then through the Department of Mental Health Addiction Services, they have directed all of the funding to the LPCs to the effect of vaping these last couple of years. We did notice over this last survey that we are seeing decreasing amounts of our students vaping. What we do know, however, through some roundtables and focus groups with our students, are that those students that are still vaping are finding it very hard to stop, because 97% of the vape products out there do have nicotine in some way, shape, or fashion, and so they're finding it's addictive, and they're finding it very hard to stop. So we need to continue the messaging that we have to create helplines to help our students stop vaping if they've started, and in middle school, if they haven't started, to stop them from starting in the first place. But a lot of the efforts nationally, statewide, and locally have been to the effects of vaping. There's been some significant legislature which is stopping some of the flavored jewel products that that students have, because that's how they're hooking them in, is through making it seem like it's candy or flavored. They're getting stricter about the control of vape products. It is illegal to sell any vaping product to anyone under the age of 21, but yet our students are still getting it. So they're making it stricter to do that. We're really happy to say that a couple of months ago, they did a sweep of some Brookfield establishments, and they had 100% compliance of not selling products to someone under 21. They had an underage buyer go in there and attempt to buy products,
Right.
and not a single one did.
And if you have it, can you give us an update on how many students are vaping? What percentage of our students are taking part in this activity? Or is it hard to say?
No, we have the survey results. The last survey, and I'm pulling it up, I don't have the numbers here, I think it was approximately 13% were engaging in some vaping at our high school level. We're not seeing that at all in middle school. We want to keep it that way, which is why we're really, really directing our efforts in middle school as well, just to stop them from starting it to begin with, which what we know is an addictive behavior.
Okay.
Thank you for being here, Colette. This is really valuable information.
Mhm.
A couple of things. You had mentioned the vaping has been a key point of interest for your program for the last 2 years. Is that correct?
This is the third year. It's a required deliverable with this grant funding. So the Department of Mental Health Addiction Services, brings the money to the LPCs with the parameters that you must use these funds to address these two goals.
Okay, so all the towns that are recipients of this LPC grant funding are concentrating on vaping?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's my only other question. Thank you. Any questions for Colette?
No, I'm good.
I move to approve the grant funding. Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion, questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank
Thank
you.
All right. Thank you.
I'll have this for you tomorrow with Cynthia,
Great. I'll pick it up then.
or tonight for that matter. All right, our next presentation is Mr. Vergati of Homeland Towers.
Good evening, First Selectman Carr, members of the board. My name is Ray Vergati. I'm with Homeland Towers. I think many of you folks up there know who I am. I do have some history here with the town. Just by way of introduction, I'm the regional manager at Homeland Towers. We're a Danbury-based company. We are a infrastructure builder. We build cell towers for the carriers for public safety. I'm born and bred in Connecticut. I've been doing this business for about 23 years. We focus throughout New England on finding properties that are suitable for cell towers. We like to work with municipalities first, obviously. If not, we work on private properties. By way of history, I personally worked with Selectmen Dunn on the cell tower here at the town campus back in 2016, 2017. That is a 150-foot monopole tower. That is still here today, obviously. A few years back, we were approached by a carrier, and that particular case was AT&T. They had a need for a tower in the southern part of Brookfield. We approached the town for a tower on Graysbridge Road. The town took a pass, which was fine. We ended up going across the street to a private property at 60vale Road, and I'm glad to say we simply recently constructed that tower on September 6th. That is a 165-foot tall monopole. We're working with the town right now on a lease agreement for that site. The town has a need to put public safety equipment up there. I'm working closely with the town's consultants, Mr. Zito, Eric Fine, and others to coordinate that effort. AT&T will be placing their antennas on there soon. We expect the other carriers such as T-Mobile, Verizon, Dish is a new provider to come to that tower at some point in the near future. Recently, a carrier reached out to Homeland Towers for another site in the northern section of Brookfield. They, along with other carriers, have experiencing coverage gaps in that area. particularly, for all intents and purposes, we'll call it the high school area, just so people have a reference. First part, when I conduct myself for business, I'll look at the land, I'll drive it, I'll do a desktop, I'll look at GIS, we'll look at various properties. I've identified 7 properties right now that the town owns. This is not set in stone, it's just something that I thought I would bring to the town's attention to start a conversation, to say, look, there's a need up there for the carriers to provide cell service. I've also spoken to your fire marshal or fire chief, Mr. Andy Ellis, and he conveyed to me, Ms. Carr, maybe he conveyed the same to you, but it's a public safety issue for them as well, up in the northern end, even though they have antennas on the high school. He said a lot of the first responders rely on their cell phones, be it their iPads, to push data through and so forth, and the radio system does not support that. So in my 23 years of doing this, when I first started tower work, it was more of a convenience to be able to call your spouse in a grocery store, hey, can you grab some eggs? I've seen it really morph and change where we are critical infrastructure. And I don't want to sit here and preach that to the board, but we are, just like sewer, electric, water, gas, we are critical infrastructure. We save lives, that's how we look at it. So there's a need in the northern section of town. I know you folks have your hands full with elections coming up. No decisions tonight, obviously. But I would like to at least start a dialogue with the town, with the board. If there is interest, basically how I operate is I will speak to the town representatives first. If there's interest, we'll go to the next step where, okay, we can do a site visit. Maybe that's 1 or 2 properties. Some of the properties up there, just from a desktop, I don't think lend themselves well. Some are wet, some are close to the historic district, some are low-lying, but it's just, an idea of these are properties that the town owns that may be suitable. We think in my initial discussions with this carrier that the high school property, which is roughly 62.5 acres in size, as well as the vacant property across the street, which is 18.5 acres in size, which I believe may hold your septic system for the high school. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Well, no, the high school now has sewer.
They do, okay.
It was across the street, but it's sewered now.
Okay, so it's a vacant, and I think it's Hot Brook that may cut through that property. So if there's interest, I don't know if Mr. Tedesco from Public Works would arrange a site visit with any board members, but how I typically conduct myself is I will do a site visit and see what properties lend themselves for construction, for setbacks, for zoning. I'd like to pick a property that's going to have the least visibility to an area. I don't know until we look at a property and I give it to the engineer for the carriers, because they're the ones that dictate the need. They're the ones that also dictate the height. So I can't stand here today and say, we need a 150-foot tower up there, or we need a 120-foot tower. The engineers operate their network and they dictate what they need, obviously.
Yeah,
From
typically towers are 150 to 180, though, aren't they?
Typically, the one here at 100 is 150. The one on Vale Road is 165. So yes, it's typical ballpark 150 to 175.
Right.
We do not build towers over 199. When you get into that height, you have to light them, paint them, stripe them for FAA purposes. We don't do that. But again, no promises tonight, no decisions tonight, but if there's interest from the town, we can have a subsequent conversation and say, okay, Ray, yes, we would potentially be interested in doing a lease at Home Lane Towers. We've done it before here at the town campus. Let's arrange some site visits, and when I do the site visits, I'll bring my construction manager along if Mr. Tedesco wants to attend, any board members to attend. And then at that point, we would look at ordering title on the property, make sure there's no encumbrances or deed restrictions, obviously, that may be on that property. As far as the zoning process goes, and just I'll spend 30 seconds touching on that, it would run the same way that we did the tower here at the campus, the town campus. There is no local P&Z or inland wetlands. They don't get a bite at the apple. There is an 824 referral that they refer to the Board of Selectmen because you're entering into a lease on town property. That's the only thing. They, as a town, or you as a landlord, still have say to say, hey, we would like you to be X feet from a wetland, or we'd like to try to cap it at this height, or we'd like to try to place it here. Can you do landscaping? Or instead of a chain link fence, can you do a solid stockade fence? As a landlord, you have the luxury of certainly putting certain things into a lease, obviously. I will add that, I've been in discussions with your first selectwoman regarding the lease over on Vale Road, and that's before the town right now, and I know it was tabled at your last September meeting, I believe. I was actually in Portugal when you folks, I wasn't here for that meeting. But that effectively could tie into this proposal that we are looking for in the north end of town. And I say that in the sense that we presented the town with business terms to go on the tower that was just constructed, 60 Vale Road. There's a rental amount in there, and we would be willing to work with the town to see if we can work something out favorably, both for us and for the town of Brookfield, to place that equipment on that 60 Vale while still going forward on a lease at the northern section of town. So that's really it from a discussion tonight. You know, it's not a lot of details, but it's more or less just to start a dialogue with the board.
So there's no time like the present. I have a bunch of questions.
Sure.
If you don't mind engaging.
Absolutely.
So back to the 2016 tower here on the town hall campus.
Mhm.
What is the arrangement with that?
The arrangement is that you, the landlord, you receive a monthly check.
How much?
I want to say that tower was signed.
$24.50 a month?
I'm sorry?
Well, I thought it was $24.50 a month.
It may have
You
escalated.
added-
It may have escalated. There's 2 carriers on there now. It
Oh,
started. It started. I want to say. I'd have to look. You obviously have the lease here. I want to say that lease was maybe whatever it was negotiated out, $1,800 or $1,900 a month. That's typically, you know, a rough average for us. It has escalated over the past 6-7 years. There's a revenue share that the town would have in there as well. That tower no longer belongs to Homeland Towers. Typically, we have an investor. When we build a tower and the tower is basically up, that tower is then assigned over to what we call the Big Three, which would be American Tower, SBA, or Crown Castle.
And the town's equipment is on that for free.
Yes, you have language that specifically states any antennas that you place either on the tower or at the base of the tower is there for rent-free. Obviously, if you're a landlord in the northern section of Brookfield, and there's a need to place public safety equipment on that tower, you would be there at no charge. 60 Vale Road is a little different, obviously, in the sense that it's on private property, and you're taking roughly a 10 by 16 square foot ground spec over there, and you're putting 3 21-foot whip antennas on that tower there. It's a rather large spec from a public safety, but we see public safety these days getting bigger and bigger.
Right.
Because these structures are becoming so critical.
So I've been told that when that decision was made, it was said that there would be no more need for cell towers, that would cover. But obviously we now know that the tower on Vale Road is accommodating for what this tower couldn't capture. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know who made that statement. Obviously, everybody has an opinion. I will tell you that this is technology works on line of sight. You're challenged here in Brookfield, like many towns in Connecticut, as you start to get into the Litchfield area, you've got terrain issues. You've got ridges and ridge lines and valleys and peaks. This is a line of sight technology. If we're in the desert, the signal propagates much further. That particular tower was there to really serve the Route 7, Federal Hill, the box stores, the in buildings where people had, carriers were experiencing coverage gaps. You know, living in Connecticut my life and knowing the area and having an office in Danbury, we've always known that the carriers had a need up on, you know, Long Meadow Hill Road and Signal Hill and going down toward the Housatonic and that whole area. People may say, Ray, I can get a phone call out. I have Verizon, I have AT&T, I have T-Mobile. It's not about getting a voice call out these days. Most of the time.
We've always had a problem in southern,
Mhm.
south of town.
Yeah.
And we've always had a problem down along Lake Lillonona.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always, everybody has
Yeah.
problems.
There's no silver
Including
bullet.
fire, police, and EMS.
Yeah, and Andy, the fire chief, mentioned, you know, absolutely, there's always been a critical need up there for first responders. The radios do work, but they don't have the cell coverage up there. And
Right.
what I try to tell people is, people make statements all the time, you know, Ray, I can get a voice phone call out, I can get a text out. It's changed. It's all about data now these days. You know, Andy's telling me he can't communicate with the hospital and get an EKG out that's driven out by data in the back of an ambulance or a fire truck because there's just no signal. So the landscape's changed, obviously. We like to partner with towns. It makes sense. The town controls it. The town recoups the revenue. So again, no decisions tonight, no promises tonight. I understand you obviously you have an election coming up in November. So
Okay, election aside, I still.
election aside, sure, fire away.
So, the 2021 decision to not put it on the Public Works site,
Mhm.
and then later down the road, it went a quarter of a mile behind the Public Works site.
Sure.
how was that decided and why?
I had appeared before the Board of Selectmen, I want to say it was August of 2021. The board just took a pass on it. They decided, unanimously, to not enter into a lease.
You were here, right?
Yeah. But I will tell you that in
We're on town
hindsight,
property, we're not on town property, now we're being approached to be on town property again, so what?
I think Homeland always comes to the towns first because they are one of the largest property owners in any town, and they have the most visibility.
Yeah.
For working with the town, and also the town sets its own zoning laws and regulations, so it's easier to work with towns. It was a unanimous decision when we decided not to put it in Public Works, and that was primarily driven by the fact that that is an incredibly small facility.
The
We could
parcel
use
has
a
some
facility
challenges.
about twice the size.
Yeah.
And giving you a 60 by 60 or 80 by 80 space.
perfect world, we do 75 by 75.
Okay, so I was pretty
Yeah.
close, is a huge amount of space on that, and I think that's the reason the Board of Selectmen made a decision.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's fine, there was no hard feelings, they took a pass on it, which was fine, and I do know that property was challenged. I know that there was a discussion that if this were to go through at 93 Grace Bridge Road, that we would have to relocate that salt dome, when you come down the driveway up to the
Yeah.
right, because that was the only logistical space where it would work. Going any further down, that property's wet with the river in the back. So the town took a pass, and that's fine. We ended up going over to 60 Vale Road. I'm here tonight to talk about the town property in the north. If the town wants first crack at it, I'm willing to open that dialogue. And I don't say this in a threatening way whatsoever. If the town politely takes a pass on the northern section, we will, or I will go out and secure a private landlord, like I've always done before. We lease properties, and various times I've bought properties.
So the tower will come whether we like it or not, in the vicinity of the high school?
Yeah, there's a need up there, and I'm just driving, the carriers are driving the need for it. They rely on Homeland Towers to build the infrastructure, obviously. So that's
And they have to show to the state and the siting council that the need is there.
correct, Steve. There's a zoning process that this all gets vetted through the state siting council under Britain, there's CSC. And
Right.
they've been around since the late 90s, I believe, and they vet the proposals pretty strongly. And they'll make sure we do our homework. Look, if there's a private parcel that is better, less impactful in the sense of environmental or visual,
They'll go that way.
they'll go that way.
Right.
Yes, Harry?
Because this is such a critical point in safety, and forgive me if I should know this, but why isn't there more support from the state, more regional? Like over in Vale, I would assume that signal will go into Bethel if it's on Vale Road. Why aren't we doing more, and maybe that's on us? Why isn't there more regional, and why isn't there more support from the state?
The state is not going to lend their support for this. It's funny, when I started doing tower work 20-some years ago, the state was approached to host towers along the highway. They missed a golden opportunity. They took a pass. There's many states that have towers at salt domes or right-of-ways on state property. The state of Connecticut, for whatever reason, took a pass. Maybe they didn't want to encumber state property. This is really, look, we're a private company, obviously. The carriers are a public company. The state doesn't get involved with it so much. The state oversees the zoning process of it, but it's really kind of goes on its own nature as far as where the carriers need to be for their public safety and for the
Correct me if
network
I'm
build-out.
wrong, though, this is really a demand-driven process,
Of course.
right?
course.
The cell tower company, Homeland, and their customers don't
I-
want
I
to
understand
build
that.
until they know they have the demand.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
with the amount of waste we have statewide in transportation, in repairs of transportation, I find it hard to believe that they put the whole burden of this. I mean, this is like, again, unless I'm seeing something different, these are huge money pits for us.
Money pits?
Yes.
$6 million investment to get
$6
our
million investment,
upgrade on
and
a pole.
there's upgrades,
Oh.
there's, here,
Oh,
well,
you're
this
talking
is-
about our radio system?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that the towns believe.
Yeah, I mean,
But I'm just saying, I just can't believe, again, I'm just venting. I can't believe that the state isn't more involved somehow.
yeah, and that's something that obviously you can speak to your local legislators about. I do know that obviously there's grant money that comes about for towns to take advantage of to purchase equipment or place equipment on towers. It's maybe an avenue that the town wants to maybe pursue a little more aggressively. I don't get involved in that aspect of it. But I do know that there's grant money that comes down from time to time from the state.
Thank you.
So just a few more follow-on questions. Sorry, Mr. Bragati. You had mentioned zoning, so with the 824 referral for town property, is there any, do you have to go before zoning for private property?
Yes. No. If I'm on town property, basically any of the town agencies, inland wetlands, P&Z, they would have say to some extent, but I don't go before P&Z for a special permit. I don't go through inland wetlands for a permit. I don't go through ZBA if I don't meet a setback. And I say that in the sense that a lot of towns, 169 in Connecticut, still have a wireless code on their books. And their wireless code may be, no structure taller than 80 feet, or no structure next to a property boundary. It's got to be 3.5 times the height of the tower away from a property boundary. So everyone still has local, regs on their book. But we would not go through P&Z. We would not go through any approval process. We would go through the 824 process that's voted on, sent to the Board of Selectmen.
Because the
as
Board of
referral.
Selectmen would have to make a recommendation
Correct.
to the Planning Commission for them to take this up and,
For town property.
Opine.
I'm talking
And what-
about
Yeah.
private
Yes.
procurement.
And what the hat that P&Z wears is this in tune with the overall comprehensive development plan for the town of Brookfield?
the POCD.
Exactly.
So back to the private,
Private property, straight to siting council. There is absolutely zero say coming to any municipality if I'm on private property.
so for example, on your map here, any one of them,
Mhm.
you've got surrounding properties. Are you able to say, who has expressed interest?
I don't share that, and what I actually will tell you is that I've yet to send proposals out to private properties.
Okay,
I
so
think
let's just say it's this plot right here behind the track. There's like 4 properties that kind of abut the back,
the 4 private parcels.
portion of the back football field.
Mhm.
Let's just say it's that middle one there. You could have it anywhere on that property. It could be on the property line.
Yeah.
And they would get the income from your rent to them.
Absolutely,
But if it
Yeah.
were 20 feet on the other side of the property line, we would miss out on that rent.
correct. And I think you have an opportunity, and I'm saying that because the town has the largest parcels. The school property is 62.5 acres. Just driving into the school entrance, you've got your maintenance sheds to the right, tennis courts are straight ahead of you, pretty much to the left. You've got a hill up there, which is all wooded.
Yeah.
You've got wetlands down to the right, but I think that property would lend itself very well for a facility, and vice versa. I think on the other side of the street, which is the 62 Long Meadow Hill Road, the 18.5 acres where the septic system used to be, I think that property lends itself well because it's 18.5 acres, it's well wooded, and it's set back from homes.
The property behind the fields backs right up to Barkwood Falls. And on top of the hill, I believe is
Gursky.
the Gursky
Gursky Farm?
Gursky Farm. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure where is there a inconspicuous place for this to go? It's not going up there.
There's nothing that's inconspicuous with a cell phone tower.
Well-
Look at them.
Well, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you're either gonna be right next to a full development, or you're going to be, right next to Gursky Farm.
Yeah, I think what Ray is saying that is if we put it in across from the high school, that's 18 acres.
Correct.
If we put it somewhere near the center of that, it would be less obtrusive to the abutting neighbors than if somebody who backs up to the track
Right,
put it on their property.
Yeah.
You would be really ticking off your next door neighbor. At least I would be ticked off, right? I don't want to see a big tower 100 feet from my property.
Not in my backyard.
And you
Yeah.
keep in mind,
The people
know,
on Vale Road were upset too.
I don't make the decision on height.
Right.
I did an 85-foot tower down in New Canaan, next to St. Luke's School, 23 feet from the school property,
I had a brother went there.
on private property. 85 feet tall, it's a monopine. I'm not saying that this would be a standard monopole like here at the town hall campus, or it would be a stealth monopine. Every site is different, obviously, and it's all driven by the network need and the height that an engineer needs,
And the terrain.
and the terrain. It's line of sight. These signals don't go through ledges or bend around corners to some extent, so.
So that's another question I had about the proximity to the school itself.
Mhm.
And I think I brought this up to you not too long ago, but just so it's clear to the public, what you're telling us is there's no stipulation for how close to a school it can be.
No, in Connecticut, the siting council likes for these facilities to be 250 feet away from a school structure. It's not written in stone. As the first select woman, you have the authority to say, well, I'm going to put it 20 feet from the school. Not that you want to do that, but it's more of a visual thing that the siting council likes to see towers 250 feet from a school. It's not because of health and safety issues, not because it's going to fall down and land on a student. It's just something that they recommend.
It's an aesthetic.
It's an aesthetic thing.
So
And I can give you,
FCC guidelines haven't been updated to determine whether or not the questions from just a few years ago have validity as to the safety of, of these structures.
yeah, we've had this conversation before, obviously, and I can tell you
think
that
it's important for the
yeah, no, obviously, it's governed by the FCC, by the Telecom Act. These towers have been around since the early 70s. I tell people Manhattan has, I've heard numbers of over 5,000 cell sites just in Manhattan. Small 4x7 island. They're in hospitals, they're in church steeples, they're in daycares, they're in apartment buildings. Might be a patch antenna in this room above our heads in school systems. There's Wi-Fi, wireless, EMF everywhere in this world. Everybody has an opinion. We follow the science. The government follows the science.
Well, that's the problem. Science hasn't said if it's safe or not.
Yeah, well, that's a conversation we can certainly have at another time, but, I think science has said, but you can read anything, obviously, on the internet. So, and everybody has an opinion. I did a tower in Easton at the Staples Elementary School on Morehouse Road. And the
And they started
selectmen,
a moratorium, right?
the selectman, Adam Dunsby, said, Ray, I do not want another Sandy Hook on my hands. I want to ensure that the elementary school has coverage. So, we can debate all the time. I don't get involved with it. We're just the builder. We're just the infrastructure builder. If the town takes a pass because they feel that it's a health and safety issue, that's fine. I will tell you that when the siting council opens up their public hearings, the very opening statement that they make is that this tower cannot be denied on health and safety. They do not entertain it. They will entertain if it's an environmental issue, meaning, you're building it and it's visually incompatible, you're affecting a
Or
historic
aesthetically,
district.
you could have put it somewhere else.
Exactly.
It's not as obtrusive, that
Exactly.
sort of thing.
Exactly.
But not health and safety.
Correct.
So what you're saying is that over a 55-year period, the town of Brookfield could have $4 million in rent.
Correct.
And at what point will we be able to understand better, like, how do we determine where you decide is the best location for your project?
So, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, if there's interest, not like a commitment, but if there's interest from the town, what I would do is coordinate a site visit with any various representatives from the town, Board of Selectmen members. If it's on school property, if there's a superintendent of school that wants to come along, Ralph Tedesco, Public Works Director, and we would do a visit, and we would take a look, walk the property, and we get a feel for, okay, if a tower were to go on town property in the north section of Brookfield, what makes the most logical sense? We have to be able to have 24/7 access to it. There has to be a 12-foot wide gravel access drive. Utilities have to be brought in underground to that site. I can't build it in the middle of a swamp. I don't like crossing wetlands. I'm not going to build it on a slope that's 20% grade. So we'll look at the lay of the land. We'll figure out what makes sense. Then I will take that information and I'll give it to the engineers at the carrier. And they'll look at it and say, yes, this potential property works. If you go in where the X is, Ray, we would need a height of 150 feet. And at that point, I would let the town know, yes, your property does work, this location. If we want to work on a lease together, I would engage your town attorney. We would run title. We do a whole plethora of phase 1 reports, environmental reports, NEPA reports, species reports, avian reports. We'd go through a tremendous amount of due diligence.
To get to that point, is there a cost to the town?
No, there's no cost, and I think Steve could attest when I did the tower here at the town campus. I think we even paid for the attorney's fees or reimbursed the town for attorney's fees. We have no problem doing that. There's zero cost to a town, zero. And that's all the way through getting a building permit. There's nothing the town has to outlay out of their pocket. All the heavy lifting is on us from a financial standpoint. And these towers aren't cheap. At the end of the day, I'm basically putting $1 million into the ground.
I mean, just at a quick glance, I could look and say, oh, maybe put it over there, farthest point away from the school type of a thing.
Mhm.
But you could turn around and say, no, we don't want it there.
Well, we're going to have, if we go down the road, there's a lease exhibit. And we just can't, you know, sign a lease with the town and decide on our own accord to say, well, we're going to move it 500 feet in zoning. We have language that the siting council says, can you tweak it this way or that way within reason, and we can write specific language, we can do that. I had a case in Sherman, Connecticut, on Coot Hill Road, where I had a tower, and we were building it, and we were going through the zoning process, and lo and behold, we had the northwestern slimy salamander. It's a salamander that habitats on steep slopes, and we're usually in forests where there's pine trees and conifer trees. So we had to move the tower. I had to get the landlords okay. We had to do an amendment. I didn't just have the right to say, I'm going to move the tower 150 feet. We had to move it to get out of the critical habitat of that salamander.
And then that, again, is subject to discussion with the town to review, to make sure
Absolutely.
that everybody agrees.
Absolutely. I won't have a landlord hold me hostage or jack me up in the sense, if I have to shift this tower 50 feet because siting council's dictating that, they say, well, we don't like it on this angle, or,
Yeah.
you know, then that's a different story, but, you know. But yeah, I've never been able to not shift something, and it doesn't happen that often. It happened to me at Salisbury School. I did a tower at Salisbury School, private school. It's a 160-foot monopine tree. And when we did our archaeological digs, the archaeologists discovered what's called shards. Basically, an Indian was sitting on a rock 100 years, 1,000 years ago, chipping away at a flint. And we had to move the tower about 180 feet, I believe. Salisbury had no issue with it. You know, they've got hundreds of acres up there, so we moved the tower. We had to memorialize that in an amendment. And we got out of that area that was sensitive, per se.
Anything else?
I don't have any other questions.
I'm all set. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your time. I appreciate it very
Thank you,
much.
Thanks. Okay, moving right along, we have Mr. Dembowski for a lot zip overview.
Hello.
Good evening.
So in your package are 3 documents regarding this LOTSIP grant solicitation that opened up a couple weeks ago. The first thing in your package is a presentation I made to you on August 7th. And nothing's changed in that presentation as far as the scope of work and the construction cost estimate. So I wasn't going to present the same thing to you again. I was just going to basically give you an update. If you want to take a second to look at that, you can do that, or I can continue. You good? Okay. Also in your package is the MOU, which was part of that presentation, the Memorandum of Understanding, for the 2 developers that have offered to pay the engineering design cost for this project. And the third document in your package is the letter of support that's required with this application. So what I'd like to do tonight is just give you an update from when I made that presentation to you on August 7th. 4 things have changed. The first is that at the last WestCog meeting, the WestCog board did adopt the LOTSIP program changes that I talked about at that meeting. I won't talk about those changes other than to say those changes have been adopted. And because those changes were adopted, they then announced the solicitation of this next round of grants.
That opened up a lot of money then, right?
Well, what's done now is projects that are more than 6 years old that go nowhere, the money gets pulled back, and that town has to reapply. That's one of the major changes. There's a few other changes, but that's a big one.
That's good for Brookfield, because we always get our projects done.
Good for Brookfield, I think. Unless Phase 4 doesn't get done in 6 years, then we'll be in the same situation. The second thing that's changed, and this was at Marcia's suggestion, that presentation talks about Streetscape Phase 6 rescoped. Marcia suggested, and I have no problem doing it, and now's the time to do it. If we proceed with this grant solicitation, we're going to call it Phase 7. That way there's no confusion on what we once had and canceled with where we're going now. They are 2 different projects at 2 different locations, and it's not a new Phase 6, it really is a Phase 7 at a different location.
Yeah.
The third change is that like I mentioned, the solicitation has opened, but the deadline is November 10th, 2023. So we have a month and a few days for this town to decide if we want to, this board to decide if we want to submit an application for that project I talked about in August. And again, just briefly as a reminder, in that package, the construction costs are just under 1.4 million. The design is basically taking our streetscape from the existing pocket park at the Dunkin' Donut Plaza, all the way south to connect to Phase 5 and the new signal light into the grocery store. That's the
Have they gotten
concept.
their OSTA permit, do you know?
Pardon me?
Have they gotten their OSTA permit for the light yet?
We heard only a couple weeks ago they did.
Good,
And that's allowing us to now finish Phase 5 and
yeah. Right,
maybe
all of that.
finally get that one done.
Are there gonna be two lights there for each entrance?
No,
or
just one.
Just one. The intersection that they actually cut into now, if you go take a look, is a right turn exit only.
Right.
So, and the last thing that changed, and the reason why this number, I put a little more money in this number than that project calls for, is about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Chief Ellis called for a meeting with the DOT at that grocery store location. Tara and I were invited to attend with him, as was Chief Puglisi and Major Frangs. The DOT was there with Chief Ellis. And Andy was expressing concern about, it just so happened a week or two before, a driver, for whatever reason, had a medical condition and crossed the trail into that development. And of course, the chief had a concern, we all would have a concern about could that impact the safety of any walkers on the trail. And at that meeting, there was a discussion about what can we do? What can the state do? And then we brought up this project being something that was going to hopefully eventually happen, and we talked about design options and what the state would consider, what the state would not consider. And because of the uncertainty of what that may entail, I actually have upped the estimate here because we may do more than what I talked about back to you in August. It may include a split rail fence. It may include moving the trail further off the road. It may include putting more of a buffer space between the road and the trail. I don't know what it's going to include, but the state clearly said to us what they won't consider because it doesn't call for it, and that would be a guardrail.
Well, but we had the same argument with the state when the Still River Greenway went in, and a car went around the corner, down across the thing, into the woods. And we beat the state up left and right.
We talked about that.
And they did give us a guardrail, even though they said it was not needed.
Yeah. So
There's probably room there to handle
the state,
a little bit.
the state made it clear that the reason that, and I'm going to paraphrase here, I'm not an expert on DOT standards, is the reason that they allowed that guardrail to go there. First of all, they said, guardrails are not put in to protect pedestrians. They are put in to keep cars on the road. And the state standard for a guardrail is the slope has to be more than 4 to 1. So at the place what she said is the place where they put that guardrail's got a steep slope. The place where we're putting Streetscape Phase 7, it's pretty flat, and there's not a 4 to 1 slope. So she said the state will absolutely not do it. So then we got into other options. And
So
because
then it would be up to the town to do it, or the developer to do it.
yeah, and it may or may not be reimbursable if it's not within the DOT standards for what lots it covers. So for that reason, I'll tell you, I upped this estimate
Yeah.
by about $100,000.
Yeah.
We may not have to spend it, we may not need it, but for coming in front of you now with that concern, we're going to consider it.
Is there an issue with us having a balance on a project and having to give the money, but does the money go back to it would go
Yeah,
back to the state?
just like phase 3 is going to come in under budget. On this final audit, the state, we're going to have to return to the state whatever money was unspent for money they gave us in advance
Right.
for that project.
Do they look on that in any critical way, saying, well, you asked for too much, or you didn't do your,
No.
not you, but the town didn't do its due
Yeah.
diligence?
No, that's all done during the design review. So every phase of a design review, there's all these milestones. You have to give them an updated cost estimate. So, no, it'll all go its normal course of business.
And the state is always happy to get money back. As long as you did a good faith estimate up front, there's no issues
Yeah.
or concerns. But we need to do something there if this happened again. I'm sorry.
And Chief Puglisi had a couple suggestions. Our engineers had a couple suggestions. I don't know which way it's going to go. I will tell you, I put on an extra $100,000 in the cost estimate.
I'm fine with that.
I just don't know if it's going to be reimbursable or is it gonna come out of the town contribution?
Right.
So that's why this number at $1.7 million is the $1.4 million of construction in that package. $100,000, maybe a little more, to cover the engineering design costs that these two developers said they would be signing that MOU to pay for. And then I put in a little more for this uncertainty of this issue. So this letter of support that's in front of you is for 1.7 million, not to exceed 1.7 million, of which 250,000 is the town contribution. And in the MOU, last sentence says that it also requires or says that these two developers will be paying the engineering design costs. And that's what that MOU is that was in your package back in August.
They
So-
were both invited to be here this evening. It's, Greg, the, vision of the Phase 7 project, would it call for the parking on both sides? We talked about that.
Yeah, we did, and this estimate does assume parking on both sides, but if we want more of a buffer between the road and the trail, we may shift the road and have a wider shoulder, and maybe parking on the side where the trail is to give a little more protection, if you will, between the road and the trail.
There is a parking lot proposed though, correct? North of the grocery store?
Parking lot is going in right now, I'm talking about just the DOT right-of-way, you know, the parallel parking, the roadside parking. So
if I
tonight,
I'm sorry, if I understand this MOU, they are willing to pay up to $109,000 towards the design.
so the way I hope I wrote it was, we don't know the cost for engineering design.
Yeah.
But if, on a $1.3 million project, good rule of thumb is 7% is engineering design. That's, well, just a little under, about $90,000. But if there's any change orders, that would be on them, because that's part of engineering design. There's always change orders. And there's also, that MOU also says, there's no guarantee this project will be done at any specific time. The DOT works at their pace, and we can't guarantee with that expenditure, the project will be done at a certain date. So we tried to word that MOU in a way that gave us all the protection and all the protection the town needs.
So if the design engineering is complete and these developers graciously paid for it, and then it ends up that we can't get approval to move forward, that's on them.
It is, it is. Now, the way we pay engineering design is as we go, so there's milestones. So they don't pay all that money up front. They're not gonna give us a check for $90,000 or $100,000 today. What we do is, after we get LOTSIP approval, WestCog approval, we then go to the DOT, then we start engineering design, and we go through stages. And they'll kind of pay as they go. They won't take all that money up front. We'll get charged by our engineering design company, and as we receive those invoices, we'll pay them, and we'll ask for reimbursement off this MOU. So it'll be a reimbursement kind of contract, is the way I see it anyway.
So what you need from us tonight is obviously a vote to apply for the LOTSIP program.
But I need your approval for that letter of support.
Yeah, from your office.
And because the application's not due till after your next Board of Selectmen meeting, you can either grant approval for Tara to sign that application when complete. It's a standard LOTSIP application, or we could wait until November if you want. I'd rather not, but you certainly have that choice. And maybe you have to schedule a special town meeting after the grant is approved,
Yeah.
unless you want to do it before.
And the state is fine with us having a town meeting after the application to approve the town portion?
The state, I don't think the state cares.
Okay.
What I did clear with the state was, is it okay for the town to receive reimbursement for its portion of engineering design? And the answer is yes.
Okay.
And it's been done in other towns before, so we're not plowing new ground here.
Would the town meeting include the gift from the developers?
It'll be
Well, it's-
part of the discussion, yeah.
I mean, we're,
The town meeting will
Accepting
simply
that
approve the
money.
amount the town is putting forward, how much the town has to put up. And you're saying it's 250 or 260?
I'm saying 250, of which
250.
will get reimbursed the engineering
90,
design
100,
portion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're really looking at a cost to the town if the developer pays 100,000, right, that's the design cost of 150 to the town.
Not to exceed 150. Steve, I hope it's nothing or less, but up
Yes.
to 150.
Oh, that's pretty standard, we've
Yeah.
done that before.
The question for you is, when does that contract MOU need to be signed as part of all of this? You know, what's the sequence of all that? I'm not exactly sure, but that's why I'm here tonight, so.
So I'll make a motion that the Board of Selectmen approve the authorization of the first selectwoman to sign the letter of support in order to apply for the lots of Phase 7 proposed project.
I'll second that, or Harry, you can.
That's
second
okay.
Any discussion on signing the letter of support?
None.
it. No,
Has everyone had a chance? Oh, all in favor then?
aye,
Aye. Have you both had a chance to look at the MOU?
Yes.
yes.
We've tabled it once.
Well, can we go back to just real quickly, go back to the letter of support? Do we need to put in our motion that the town will hold a town meeting?
It doesn't have to be in the letter of support.
It says it in there,
It says
subject
it
to
in
Board of Finance and approval by town meeting.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure. I'm sorry, I missed that.
I put it in there, how about
Good job.
that?
Thank you.
Yeah, I've read this memo of understanding with the developer, and it seems pretty straightforward to me.
Mhm.
Yeah, obviously the date would need to be changed, but that's
Right,
administrative.
we'll have to update it to
Yeah.
get to the right date. But I would
mean,
make a motion that
It's a
we,
very generous offer.
yeah, I would make a motion that we approve the memo of understanding, which allows for the developer to pay for up to, it looks like $109,000 right now.
That's I
as
think that says
estimate.
it's an estimated number.
As an estimate.
But again, I took $1.3 million, I said roughly 7%, so it's just a ballpark number.
We'll probably be within.
Well, we're gonna go out to bid, because it's gonna be a town expenditure for what we get reimbursed. We have to use our procurement procedures to get
Yeah.
that contract, so I don't know what it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be in that range.
And if I understand this, if I'm reading this MOU correctly, that they've agreed to pay for the design costs regardless, there's no upper limit on there, right?
That's the way we wrote it, Steve, and I
That's the
think
way we wrote
that's
it.
only fair because
Yeah, this makes sense.
change orders.
This makes a lot of sense.
So what was your motion?
So I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the first selectwoman sign the memo of understanding between the town and, is it these two people or is it their businesses?
Well,
represent
those two individuals said they will sign it.
Okay, then.
And by the way, they've both seen this, they both have seen it,
Paul Scouser.
they both have seen it, and they said they're ready to go.
Okay, so they're willing to take this personally as
They're ready to sign it, is all I can tell you is what they said.
I don't know if I'd be personally willing to sign it, I'd have my business sign it, but
With an updated date.
these, they're good developers. We
I'll
know.
second it.
Okay,
Any discussion on the MOU?
no,
Hearing none, all in favor?
aye.
Aye. Is that an aye, Harry?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
All right. Okay,
We're off to the races,
yes, sir.
phase
Thank you.
7.
Get her done.
Thank you, Greg. Hit him straight.
Moving right along. Thank you, Greg. I just wanted to take a moment for announcements and start off by talking about Mr. Van Heist, who sadly passed away a week ago today. And there was a really great article in one of the papers, I don't remember which one, but they talked about a lot about his life and the type of individual that he was, and I just wanted to share a little bit of that. The newspaper said he was a stalwart advocate for Brookfield, and I can attest to that. I'm sure you gentlemen
true.
can as well. But it said that he sat on the planning commission for nearly as long as he worked for his longest tenured employer, which was IBM. And according to his biography he provided to Hearst Media before the 2019 election, he worked there at IBM for 35 years. So you can see that he spent as much time in town government as he did at his professional life. He was a microelectronics engineer and manager. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering, from the University of Bridgeport, and then later obtained a Master of Science. Mr. Dombowski described him as someone who others always looked to for leadership and direction. And Greg recalled working with him on the last POCD, or the Plan of Conservation and Development, which is our strategic plan that's updated every 10 years, and it's coming up for renewal in 2026, so just a few years ago. But it was through that process of them working together that Greg learned of Mr. Van Heis's vision, which was to have smart economic development and growth in a responsible way. And I know that he will be greatly missed by those who loved him, and I just want to take a moment of silence in his honor. Thank you very much.
If I could just say one thing, I worked
Sure.
with John, I've known John for 12 years. He's an incredible advocate for the town, and the work he and the planning commission did to build our plan of conservation and development. The Four Corners is actually a testament to the work that John did. They envisioned a new downtown for Brookfield, and they helped make it happen. And John is an incredible person. I'm gonna miss him a lot. I know a lot of people in this room are gonna miss him. He just cared about this town. So we're sorry to see him go.
Thank you. Oh. For October, our coffee will be at Dunkin' from 9 to 10. Look forward to seeing people there. I was the only one there on Saturday, so come on out. Our sign up, I posted this on social media because it's very important for Everbridge, especially for our emergency notifications. There's a link on our website, brookfieldct.gov. All you have to do is click on the little red icon that says subscribe, but it's very important that in case of an emergency that you get those alerts and you're kept informed of what the situation on the ground might be in case there's ever an emergency. And similarly, another form of communication that the town has had for quite a while is our Spotlight newsletter, and you can also subscribe for that on the town website. As to our vacancies, we have 2 on the Arts Commission, 1 on the Conservation Commission, 1 for Economic Development, 2 for the Energy Advisory Board, 1 for the Housing Authority, 1 regular and 2 alternates for Inland Wetlands, 1 alternate on the WPCA, 2 alternates and 1 non-voting youth member for the Youth Commission. And a final announcement that I have is a note of thanks to the Garden Club for the fall decorations. They look really good, and I just love this time of year when the pumpkins are out and the scarecrows are out, and there's a lot of really great programs at Parks and Rec for everything Halloween related. So thanks to everybody who's working hard across town to keep it looking really good. We had some correspondence this month, as you can see that's listed there. And if no questions on any of that, over to Marcia.
All right, so every quarter we've been doing budget transfers. At the beginning of the year, it gets a little complicated because we have last year and this year to do. So if we start talking about 2023, you have the expenditures for 2023, budget to actual, with some proposed transfers, just the final transfers to clean it up. It's been out for about a month, so you may have already seen those numbers. We have intra-department transfers, that's within each department, and we have inter-department transfers between one department and another. Do you want to talk about that and see if there's any questions? They're all color-coded. And the motion number ties to the file number. That is got yellow at the top of the page.
Yeah.
Any questions on those transfers?
Yeah, I just wanted to discuss the union wages, police, 51716, because it's a large amount. Could you?
That's 2024.
I'm looking at 2023. Oh. No, it says 2023 here.
It says through September,
This is
oh, the,
general fund expenditures budget versus actual through 6/30/23,
okay, sorry,
right?
we have it on both years, you're absolutely right.
Page 52.
Union, union wages,
It says employee turnover.
yes. So we've had a lot of turnover at the
Yeah, I know.
police, that we've had a lot of vacancies at the police, I think, and someone in HR might just give me a nod, I think that we're finally fully staffed now at the police, yes. We are finally fully staffed at the police, but that was not the case last year.
No, okay.
We had a lot of retirees.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions on 2023's transfers?
No.
I appreciate this overview packet, which is very descriptive. I don't know if you all got this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I don't have any other questions on 2023.
So that is the expenditures for 2023. We also have revenue for 2023. It's got purple at the top of the page.
Did anyone have any questions on the inter?
No, I just had the one question.
Do you
Which
want to
was
do the
answered.
motion and then move on, or just?
Yeah, I think we should
Okay.
just keep it clean. So I'll make the motion that we approve the intra-department transfers for year-end 2023 as noted on the budget versus actual expenditure report. Do you want the total in there? Or is it just indicated as the, let's do,
I don't think we normally put the total, but
No,
Steve
we
always
don't.
asks me the total, so in those, the additional information, I did put the total.
Yeah.
44,211.79.
Yeah. Yep.
Second?
Oh, I'm sorry, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on intra?
No, I'm good with that.
Harry?
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
And there were no questions on inter, or did you explain everything you needed to explain on that, Marcia?
I believe I did.
Okay, so,
Just one thing, so for the public who's not, can't read these because they're pretty small, can you discuss the transfer to CNR fund of 25,000 with
Yes.
the FEMA money?
Yes, so when we originally did the budget, that we were going to, we received a grant from FEMA of $500,000 for reopening, and we were going to put that in the capital non-recurring fund. And then through the budget process and through all the changes, and then we were going to transfer that in this year's budget, in the '24 budget, 25,000 of that back to help offset some of the costs of utilities that were very high at the time and are again now.
Right.
We went all the way through that, and by the time we were done with the mixing up and moving capital projects back and forth and using the revenue, that we decided to keep the FEMA $500,000 in the general fund.
Okay. Right.
But we have to transfer 25,000 to capital non-recurring, and then transfer it back next year, in the 2024 year, if we want to make the budget. So it's just moving it over, and then we'll move it back.
Okay. Thank you.
okay, so I'll make the motion that we approve the inter-department transfers for year-end 2023 as noted on the budget versus actual
I'll
expenditure.
second that.
Totaling
question.
36,459.79. Any discussion?
No question.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the next one is still 2023, and it's got purple at the top. It's the revenue. The state statutes talk about transfers of expenditures, and the charter talks about transfers of expenditures. There's no discussion of revenue, but it is best practice for large amounts, to try and clarify it in the revenues, for, just for those people that like to read financial statements, not many of us.
All three of them?
Yes, that, so for example, if we were to have received an extra $1 million in a grant, all and want to spend it out of the general fund, all we're required to do is add that as an expenditure, maybe an additional appropriation to the general fund. But for someone reading the financial statements
won't understand
or a bonding company, they say, oh, an additional $1 million.
Right.
And this kind of finishes the story to say, yes, an additional $1 million, but we got that money from up
Yeah,
here.
here's where it came from,
Correct.
here's where we're spending it. And last year was really unusual with
Correct.
the amount of money that came in.
Correct, and we noted all that in our bond documents. But this one, when we did the budget, it's, we always have more revenue than we have projected, that we're conservative on our projections, that, and we don't want to be too conservative. So last year, for the first time, 2023, for the first time, we added 200,000 to other revenue, saying, we don't know where it's coming from,
But it is
but we always get more revenue than we anticipate. We don't want to overtax people. So we put 200,000 in other revenue. And so this would transfer that up to investment income, because that's where we really got the extra revenue. And then the other one is just a small transfers, dividing up some of the police revenues that they had 3 different types of revenue in one line, and then they were keeping their own schedule outside of outside of Munis.
Yeah.
And that's just a duplication of work, and so we were just going to divide that up. So there's no, you don't have to make these transfers, but I'm proposing that we make them just to have more clarity.
Yeah, and to clean up for future people coming back to look at it and saying, what
Right.
happened there?
All 3 of us.
Yeah.
And who are those 3?
That is motion number 2.
Who are the 3 people?
I think it's me, myself, and I.
Oh, that's why you get paid the big bucks.
That's correct.
All right, anybody want to make that motion? All right, I will. Motion to approve the revenue transfers for year-end 2023 as noted on the budget versus actual revenue report and forward to the Board of Finance for their approval.
I'll second.
You want a second? Go ahead, Harry will second that.
Any discussion on budget versus actual for revenue?
No.
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 The third one for 2023, you don't have any file that goes with it. Last month, you made a motion to transfer money from the cash capital projects
Bonded.
to the bonded capital projects. And the motion called for a transfer of $25,615. I made an error on that number, that I highlighted in Excel, and I looked at the bottom of the page and I picked the average. That shows the average and the total, and I just picked the average instead of the total. And so I just want to correct that the dollar amount is not $25,615, it's $51,230. But it's the same 2 projects that we talked about, 18 for phase 2, and 33,000 for the boys' locker room. So the only difference is the dollar amount in the motion. I'd like to amend to the correct number.
You're human, Marcia?
Ugh, it hurts.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's just a clerical error.
Correct.
So I'd make a motion to approve a transfer from capital non-recurring to the bond capital fund of $51,230 to fund Streetscape Phase 2 in the amount of $18,000 and the boys' locker room renovation in the amount of $33,230.
I'll second this.
It's more about the total than the amount of the projects.
For a total of $51,230.
Thank you. And forward to the Board of Finance.
I'll second that as well.
You want to forward it to the Board of Finance, right?
Yeah, and of course, and forward it to the Board of Finance for their review and possible approval.
You seconded, Hare?
Yes.
Thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that closes 2023. The audit, they're doing their final reviews. Once we have these approved, if we have these approved by the Board of Finance, we will try to get the audit out by the end of the month. The next one, we start talking about 2024, the first quarter of 2024. And the file that we're talking about are budget to actual expenditures, and it has the brown highlights at the top. And we're looking to do intra-fund transfers, and the intra-fund transfers are within the departments. I'm just trying to find mine. Pull it up.
The big one is the 110 for the police.
Correct. They total about 135,000. The big one is the
Legal.
police. The Chief Puglisi came, I think, last month and talked, earlier, and talked about making a change so that moving a union officer to an administrative position.
Right.
So this moves the money because those are in separate budget line items. That's 110,000 for
From
making that
union
change.
up to non-union wages.
And moving it up to non-union wages, correct. So that's the biggest amount that's in there.
But I think it should be said, if we move this and approve this, what we're really doing is adding a staff member to the police department. And next year, we're gonna have to come up with $110,000 in the budget to cover that.
That
We
is
can
already
get it out of,
approved.
we can get it out of the union wages this year, right? But if we're fully staffed, next year, the union wages won't have $110,000 to transfer to non-union, correct?
So this year, it's because he's, let's say, and I can't remember
Yeah.
the numbers, other than there's 4 admin and maybe 30 officers.
Yeah, there's
And
4 and 30.
so now it's going 5 and 29. It's
Right.
not increasing the role. However, if they're short, they may ask for more people, right? So it's decreasing the number of union officers right now.
Yeah, but I had thought that John, I could be wrong, I thought that John had said next year they want to keep the same amount of officers. They're moving the funding from the union to non-union this year to pay for the new management position, because we had, people on a lot of different issues they could pay for it. But that next year, I thought he said he's going to ask for 30 police officers, as well as 5 management. I'm just saying we should be aware of that, if they ask for that. There's gonna be,
Did you talk to him recently about that?
no, I thought he said it during the meeting,
don't
when I asked him, I
remember
thought I asked him during the meeting. Now, I don't have a problem with that, I just want everybody to be aware of
Not
it.
the way I understood it, but
Does Fern have anything?
Can I say something?
Can we ask Fern to join the
absolutely.
conversation? Would you come up, Fern, please? I may have it wrong, I just wanna make sure we know what we're looking at next year.
It's 4 admins, so we have 4 admins, and what we did was we took one from below,
John,
brought him up. So you have John, Matt, Pete,
And then Tony's gonna.
John, and so, right,
No, Tony added.
Tony.
It was 3.
Yeah, we're adding Tony
right, that's
Right.
4.
to 4-4. But we
Right.
took that from the
We took that from the union, right.
Right.
My understanding, and I'm not sure, I can't speak, but my understanding is correct what you said, Steve, that he would be asking for another police officer next year.
Right. Because of their scheduling, the 30 is the number they need.
Right.
Just so we're aware of it.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And he did say that we had a quarterly budget meeting with him. He did say that he'll be putting that in his budget for next year.
Okay, so that expense will be there.
Any questions on the expenditures through 9/21/23 budget to actual with the brown heading?
23 or 24?
It's for year-end '24, but it's through September of '23.
Through September. Yeah, I have a concern. I just wanted to clarify the police issue, but on legal fees, we are just going, if I understand this correctly, we have a total of almost $30,000 in additional legal fees. That would be in the interdepartment, 14,416, and 15,000 in blight, over and above our budget. That's correct, and we're moving 10,000 from the pension legal to labor.
That is correct.
That's correct. I mean, $30,000 is a lot of money 4 months in, and before we approve that and send it to the Board of Finance, I want to understand what these numbers are made up of, and is this the whole number? Are we going to have additional expenses? I know that there is one issue with the zoning board where we spent $11,000 on a lawsuit from one of the applicants where the.
It wasn't a lawsuit, it was an administrative appeal.
Yeah, well, just let me finish. If we had taken, if I understand this correctly, an applicant came to the zoning board and said to the zoning board, we want to put a religious organization in this location. The zoning board said no. The zoning board said it's not in our zoning regulations. Let me get that correct. The applicant said federal law states that churches' rules, federal law trumps state and local, and that you have to allow this, right? And the zoning board still voted no. What the zoning board should have done at that point in time is said, wait a minute, we don't know anything about this federal law. Let's table this issue and get the town attorney to give us an opinion whether this federal law does apply in this case, but they didn't do that. What they took a vote and they voted no. They turned the applicant down, and the applicant in turn turned back and sued the town. And so far, my understanding is, if this is correct, we spent about $11,000 on that one issue.
And we spent almost 80 on the rewrite that didn't include the federal statute.
Yeah, zoning cannot include adapting to every single state and federal law that changes. You would never have any zoning. I know what you're saying. Zoning was written under my purview. It was, that's true,
And
right?
it was wrong.
It does not account for every single state and federal law. It cannot do it. There are too many changes, too many adaptations.
We're trying to right the ship, and these things they come with a cost, like.
Yeah, they do, but in this case, $11,000 is the cost we did not need to incur. If we simply said, wait a minute, we don't know what this law is.
There are
Let's
plenty examples
table
of where
this
we've spent money
application.
in this town, Steve, and we should.
Wait a minute, let me finish. Let's table this application and talk to the town attorney and say, hey, does this federal law apply in this case? And the town attorney probably would have said, yes, it does. And you say, okay, we have to approve this application. We didn't do that. Instead, two members stated they never read the application and voted no.
Because it came in the night before.
It doesn't matter, then they should have tabled it.
Then you don't vote on it.
Then you
haven't
don't
read
vote
the
on it.
information, you don't.
But they all voted.
But if you
Yeah,
haven't
and
read the information,
it was
then you don't vote.
4 to
or you
1.
recuse yourself.
To turn it down, right?
Okay, are you a zoning commissioner? Are you a zoning commissioner? I'm certainly not a zoning commissioner, so.
No, but I know better than to vote on something when
Oh.
I haven't read anything. I would recuse myself.
Yeah.
My concern is, it's 11,000 now. Is this the end of it? Is there more to
No,
come?
it's not the end, and Glenn Rooney and Phoebe Holmes FOIA'd it. I gave them the information they wanted, we don't have a crystal ball on these things. The attorney has to go to court to close the appeal legally
Yeah.
in October. All these things, time is money, it costs money.
Yeah, so we
And
spent
there's a,
11,000.
to the other cases, that isn't the only case that's costing us money. We have two major cases that are blighted properties that have been sitting in town that way for decades.
Yeah, so I am not comfortable with approving these expenditures until we know more detail. I would make a motion that we get that information. We can meet in executive session because it involves legal, right? And that we understand fully what these expenses are for and dimension what we think the expenses are gonna be in the future.
Well, all
Because
the
this is
invoices
a
are
lot of
very
money.
clear, and they indicate every single ounce of energy that's gone toward every single one of these cases, which isn't true of the previous attorneys. There was no invoicing. So at least we have that.
Yeah,
And I'm
I
happy
think
to-
this is, when we're talking about, we're $30,000 over budget, 4 months into the fiscal year, we need to understand what this is gonna be. And I would make the motion that we table that approval. I am fine with the intra-department, within the department, transfers, they're reasonable, and this is the sort of thing that you actually go through. For example, under employee benefits, that's one of the big ones. We did have one person who signed up for our defined contribution, right? And so we have to join, I'm fine with that.
$4,000.
Yeah, $4,600, I'm fine with all of these transfers, with the exception of the interdepartment transfers, and I would not agree.
Marcia, if
to
this was
approve that.
tabled, is this, not damaging, but is this detrimental at all?
No, part of this is we haven't spent the money yet, that we're anticipating spending it because of our purchase order system and our encumbrance system. We have not gone over budget yet, so that is important, and we're just kind of in between a rock and a hard place when it's legal fees, because it's hard to say, don't respond to that lawsuit, so we're running the fine line of trying to meet budgetary compliance and legal things, but that would, I don't see anything in the inter-department transfers that couldn't wait until next month.
Yeah.
Did we need a second before we started talking about this? Did you make a recommended motion?
Well, I think the original motion was to approve the intra-department. I think Tara made that motion.
Right.
Did you, right?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
But so moved, that we approve the interdepartment transfers.
I will second the intra-department. I'm fine with those. Those all make a lot of sense to me.
The intro is fine with me, yeah.
Any further discussion on intra?
No.
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Over to inter, would it make sense to leave the legal out and do the others, Marcia, or just table them all?
No, I think I would make a motion to table them all for right now.
Okay, I'll second that. Any discussion?
No, I'm fine with that.
All in favor?
Aye. And then I would make a motion that the Board of Selectmen arrange to have an executive session to discuss these expenses in detail, because legal, we're allowed to do that.
Tonight?
No.
No, I think we want to get more, the actual background. I think we're going to need the actual detail.
And I would say that do it after the 15th or so, because then we'd have the September bills, and we'd love
That would be very
a little
helpful.
more.
So to have an executive session after the 15th of the month to understand exactly what we're getting ourselves into, right? And then make a motion there afterwards, if we're comfortable, to go to the Board of Finance. And actually, I don't know, what do you guys think? Should we invite the Board of Finance into an executive session to discuss legal fees? Because they may do the exact same thing and say, hey, we want to understand
Some of these legal
these.
fees is $10,000 of labor attorney, which include town employees. It's not for them to be a part of that, Steve, no.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, the
Yeah.
Board of Finance will probably say, I want to understand what these legal fees are. And we have a right to maintain secrecy about them because we are being sued and we're going through lawsuits. We don't have to discuss those lawsuits in public. So my guess is the Board of Finance is going to do the same thing that I'm doing right now.
So they want to talk about the cases that don't pertain to employees?
They wanna, yeah, I would think so, yeah. They wanna I'm guessing, I wanna understand what makes up these these expenses.
I mean,
So
would
the
they have,
employee one,
We
the
have all
labor,
the
The
invoices.
the employee one is labor,
and that's
That-
just been approved,
and that's intra,
correct?
so that we've already approved.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
talking
I'm
about the
sorry.
other legal fees. I'm just saying,
I
I
don't
think
mind them coming, I would think they would have their own, but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter to me whether.
they're gonna have the same questions I have, I think. Maybe not. So that's my motion, is to table
we can
the
invite them to come in.
inter-department until we can have a meeting to understand exactly what these legal fees are made up of, and have a discussion in executive session.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Are you in favor?
I'll do that, sure.
Okay.
All right. For 2024, the next one is the capital non-recurring fund. That's the cash capital. It's highlighted in pink at the top. And we're looking to shift some money around.
Yeah.
That the police scheduling program, we had a change in police administration, and the new administration picked a cheaper program. So we want to close that and release the $19,000 there. The labor for the pump and the motor at Town Hall is done, so we have $1,500 there to release. The bid came in for the 6-wheel international dump truck at $8,000 higher. If you remember that a few years ago, that Public Works, used to put a contingency in each one of their projects. The
Right.
Board of Finance has asked not to do that.
Pulled that out.
So sometimes they will be higher, especially in this environment. So that's an $8,000 increase. Baseball, softball drainage, the engineered plans is done. There was $4,200 left. We want to close that. A Parks and Rec flatbed truck, that's done. There's $3,300 there. We want to close that. The trail light trailer, they're working on getting bids for this. That this should be the worst case scenario, but they're trying to get bids for it and trying to negotiate a trade-in. So they thought this would be the worst case scenario, and of course, if they didn't spend it, they would return it, not add attachments or
That makes
anything.
sense.
The Kubota mower, the bid came in for that higher than budgeted by $13,000. And the Still River Greenway line to New Milford, we had money in anticipating a grant. We didn't get the grant, and now we don't need to keep it there because Westcog is taking over the Still River Greenway activities. So in total, the net amount is that we're releasing $58,000.
That makes sense.
So I'll make the motion that we approve the proposed transfers between projects as shown on Marcia's report through September 20th,
Yeah.
2023, and forward to the BOF.
I'll second that. Fine with that.
Any discussion on the transfers?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next is got green highlights at the top of the page, and it's the ARPA fund, and we can only reduce the ARPA fund. We can't add to it without going to a town meeting. Town building accessibility, the cost was much higher than anticipated. Between that and just what Public Works has going on and timing with all the CES building issues, that Ralph would like to release that money so we could use it someplace else where it might be better used. That's $32,000. The Social Service Resource Center, that they gave a proposal. They had some very favorable pricing. They'd like to release $9,000. And the Museum and Historical Society HVAC and roof, there was favorable pricing and a big rebate. So they want to release 15,000. So in total, it would be releasing 56,780 of the ARPA money.
I make a motion that we approve the ARPA fund attachment labeled year-end 24_3, 2023-9-20 ARPA fund budget versus actual.
I'll second.
And forward to the Board of Finance.
And forward to the Board of Finance for their review and possible approval.
I will second that as well.
Any discussion?
None.
I just wanna say that 56,780 should be allocated and spent by the end of 2024
Right.
calendar year, right?
Yep.
Any other discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, there's two more that, all these people, I can see their faces, they're not the people that read the financial statements, oh, maybe one. That, there's two more reports, none have a motion on them, they're just for your information. The one with the blue at the top is the bonded capital projects. There were no transfers needed, up or down, this quarter. And the one with the red at the top is the revenue. There's no big surprises in revenue. Some small adjustments. The state came out in August with their final numbers, so those are shown there. That would be about 92,000 more than what we had anticipated. But just like last year, we put money in for additional money unanticipated. So.
Just to be safe.
Just so we're not too overly conservative.
And just an update regarding the 5 million bond for the townwide radio system for the grant that I applied for. It's been reduced from a 3 million request down to $963,000, and it's going to the Appropriations Committee for further evaluation. So now that the continuing resolution's been passed and the government wasn't shut down, maybe we'll be hearing about that soon. But right now, it's looking at about a $963,000 savings for the town.
That would be good. Get that. Just one question. The auditors were in, and we're in good shape, right?
The auditors were in, that we had no audit adjustments. As far as I know, we have no audit comments.
No exceptions.
No exceptions. We're trying to get the report out by the end of the month, and
Great.
although it's not a competition, last year the first report that went out didn't go out till November, so we're trying to get ours out in October. And the reason that we were able to do it a little earlier this year is we didn't have bonding this year, so the time that the finance office spends on the official statement, we were able to put directly into the closing the books.
Right.
And it takes about 200 hours to close the books.
Well, appreciate all your hard work, Marcia. I guess we'll see you in executive session for the legal conversation.
Okay.
Anything else from you? Finance?
No.
So we don't have any new items yet. Moving on to number 7, I'd like to make a motion to add 2 items, the fire study and the steep grant update.
I'm sorry, the first one was? I'm sorry.
The fire study.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. I'll second that, add them.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So real quick, on the fire study, an email was sent to you at my request from Greg with the draft. We sent it to the 2 chiefs, the fire marshal, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Finance, and our purchasing agent. I'm not sure if you were in receipt of that, Marcia, or not, but it's just in draft form, and we're asking for feedback on the draft to be put into its final form and then presented at our next Board of Selectmen meeting. So if you wouldn't mind taking the time
Sure.
to really look that over. It's 272 pages, I believe, and there's a lot of really valuable information in there, so put you fast asleep. But I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And then the second item, which you probably saw in the news, is the steep grant. That was awarded late Friday afternoon. The governor had a press release and many towns were in receipt of it. You can look on the website as to who received what. A lot of it that was allocated was for projects such as the one that we had presented in our application for an upgrade to the town hall campus, which is part of a phased approach to the master plan to renovate the campus. So this project would include a construction of 4 pickleball courts with ADA compliant access getting from the parking lot to the lower portion of our grounds, especially for our concerts in the park and other events where people need that access. So it's an overall improvement. The estimated cost is $589,000, of which $489,000 would be contributed by the state. So our match is $100,000. And as Marcia just said, in the capital non-recurring report, we now have at least $58K that's been freed up for other projects. But I think there's like 1.5 in there as well. We talked about where we can earmark that money from last time, and we're now trying to determine, can it just be transferred, or do we have to take this to a town meeting?
I think, my opinion here is we have to take it to a town meeting, and should take it to a town meeting. If we're gonna do an additional appropriation of that amount of money, I think the residents should get a say. I think it'll pass in flying colors.
I
Right.
tend to agree with you, but just to be clear, that the money that would be transferred has already been appropriated, so it's a little bit of a nuance with the wording of how the charter's written.
It's
So-
been appropriated from where?
So can I talk?
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
We had talked about, it didn't need to go to a town meeting before the application,
Right.
because it was, at that time, we were thinking of transferring it from other projects. So that's why the town attorney said that part of the charter that said an application, if it requires an additional appropriation, doesn't apply, because it would be a transfer and not an additional appropriation. Ask the town attorney, not me. But now, the excess money has been put down into fund balance, so we would have to follow whatever we need for additional appropriations.
Which I think is a town meeting, and I think we should give the residents the opportunity to come to a town meeting.
I have no problem with that.
Harry?
I agree.
Right?
So the intent isn't necessarily to vote on a town meeting tonight, because we would need to have a date, I believe, right? And this just came out Friday night, so we really haven't had any reaction time.
There's a time, so we would need to request from the state an extension, because we have to show them that we have funded, right? And if we need a town meeting to approve that funding,
I don't know what that
I think it's
timeline is.
30 days, steep grant they want a response by, right?
The award, can I just?
Yeah, could
The
you?
award letter that we received Friday says that the next step, and we can do nothing until they send us a contract to sign.
Okay,
So Tara will be offered a contract at some point, maybe in a few weeks, and whatever has to be done for her to sign that contract for this, we're talking about the steep grant,
yeah.
is the next step. We have to sign a contract before we can do any work.
Yeah, but the contract, I think, if I remember correctly, will say that the town will put up $100,000.
Because that was in our grant application, not to exceed 100,000.
Not to exceed 100,000, but there, we would need the town meeting to approve us, Tara, to sign that.
Because we'll be spending a total of up to 589,000.
Right.
In total.
Yeah, so that's a town meeting, not a referendum.
Referendum.
But before you can sign it, we need that approval.
So at our special meeting with the executive session, I'll have that on the agenda so we can get the town meeting scheduled. The idea would have been to maybe do the lot zip in a town meeting with, you know.
Yeah, we
Did
could
we
do
have
it at the
anything else
next
for
Board of
town meeting? No.
Selectmen meeting, right?
I think.
Is there a deadline on the steep by the time we have to return it? I thought those were 30 days.
That's what I'm looking for.
I don't know until we see the contract, Steve. I'm not sure.
Okay, all right. Well, let's see what the contract is, and
I
then,
mean, again, this just came out on Friday night, so I
yeah,
had some time to
yeah.
figure it out. All right, but I just wanted to give that update on the steep grant. I think it's good news, and we'll see what the town wants. The other item for updates are job descriptions, which you got a separate green folder for all of those.
Yeah.
And Fern, I didn't know if you wanted to speak to this, but there's no requirement to have the Board of Selectmen approval for these updates. It's just, I guess, a common practice
Yeah,
as a
we've done that
courtesy in the past. Have
I
you all
ha-
had a chance to look through the?
I haven't had a chance to go through all of these. I would
Yeah.
like to.
Well, we've had a lot of turnover in the last 20 months, so a lot of them are current.
Yeah.
And Fern did ask, Fern, do you want to speak to it? I don't want to speak for you, but.
So basically, the job descriptions that you guys have been updated. A lot of the language just has been changed to update the systems and stuff like that. No real significant changes, just basically outlining more of what they're doing versus just, you know, your basic generic. So you won't see huge changes in the job descriptions, but we've had, you know, a lot of new department heads, so we wanted them to have the opportunity as well to go through and check them out and stuff like that. And interesting enough, I always was under the impression that these had to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, and then when speaking with Pat McHale, who's our, you know, counsel for Labor Council, he advised me that it doesn't. It just needs to be, you know, approved by me and the first select person, so.
That's interesting, because we've always approved.
I
them
know,
before.
and that's why when he said that to me, I was like so surprised. And he said, no, there's nothing in the charter, there's nothing in the rules and regs, he said, so.
Well, I think it's
that-
got more eyes on it, right?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with everybody taking a look at it, actually,
Yeah.
so I don't have a problem with
Okay.
that. But I just thought it was interesting, because all
Yeah.
these years, I always thought it was something that,
Oh, I was under the same impression
yeah,
for 8
that had to
years.
be approved, so.
Okay.
So it's very minor stuff, nothing, and I went through them all, and they were all accurate, so there shouldn't be any issues.
Great, thank you.
So do you want to take the time to review them and we can table to November, or?
Yeah, I would
Yes.
like to take time. It was all, it's
right,
like
that's-
100 pages.
If you guys have any questions, or,
Yeah, we'll just come to you.
yeah,
Right.
just email me or text
Right.
me, whichever's easier,
Okay.
and that way at the next meeting, you guys can just approve.
So that's the motion to table to November Board of Selectmen meeting.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, consent agenda. I'd like to make the motion that we approve the items A through E. I did want to add that there are no minutes from the meeting on the 30th, since there was no quorum. And for the lots of MOU and letter of support, we already approved that tonight. And then highlighting our employee changes, we've had 2 new hires, Jeff Priano and Armando Portella, who will both be going to our Public Works Department. And we had 2 resignations. So that was the motion.
Oh, I'll second it, sorry.
Any discussion?
No.
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. With the addendum that, what you said, that we had already approved the lot zip, so we're taking that out of this.
Yes.
Okay.
And that there was no
Right.
minutes from the meeting on Saturday.
Right.
Okay, moving along to item 9. For our appointments, the Capital Planning Ad Hoc Committee's term expired on the 31st of August. They were serving from the 7th of November 2022 through the 31st of August 2023. So this is the group that originally formed on September 13th of 2021. And then on October 3rd of 2022, we reappointed the Capital Ad Hoc Committee that was comprised of representatives from the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the Board of Ed.
Right.
And the charge was given to them to review the capital expenditures for the 2022-23 budget year prior to the budget season beginning, and to review the 10-year capital plan. So the invitation hasn't been extended back to the town committees for representatives to be brought forward, so I need to give them a chance to do that and see.
Yeah, we should
where
do
we are
that
to
sooner rather
reestablish
than
it.
later, because
Right.
we want them to start looking at capital in November, if we can get them together.
Yeah,
Right.
well, last year they didn't start till December.
Yeah, I know.
So-
The more time we give them, though, the better. I would think a lot of the people that are on it now will re-up, as it were. So the town has gone to the Democrats and to the Republicans, and also to a notice out to any unaffiliated who would like to sit on the Capital Committee to come back.
Yes, that would be the notification.
Okay, and when did we ask them to come back and tell us they are interested? Did we say?
The week before our next meeting, we can have them appointed
Okay.
on the 6th of November.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Okay. And then I'd like to recommend that we enter into executive session to discuss pending litigation, which is negotiation of a blight lien for the town of Brookfield versus 20 Station Road, and invite Attorney Marini and Greg Dombowski.
I'll second that.
Okay, do you want just
And Cynthia, thank you.
Cynthia?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Any discussion on that
No?
motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can we take 5-minute break?
Absolutely. Oh, did Colette leave?
Yes. She left.
Oh, they did? Huh? Okay. That's great. Huh? Yeah, I do. Hi, John.
How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good. Okay, so we are out of executive session, and I'd like to make a motion that the selectmen negotiate the blight lien on,
That's not, no, that's not.
Yep, the form of motion could be, motion on, whether, whether the selectmen would be willing to entertain a compromise of the board. And then you could.
Well, I make a motion that the Board of Selectmen not entertain any compromise regarding the blight liens or other expenses incurred by the owner of the property, 20 Station Road.
That's fine.
I'll second that. Any discussion?
We will also, did you get all that?
No, most of that,
It's being,
No, I'm,
we have a second?
yes.
Tara seconds.
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm a no.
Sure.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I
And
make a motion,